Andy, you've made a lot of films at this point, right? I Can Only Imagine. You've got I Can Only Imagine 2, Ordinary Angels. I mean, I can go down the list. There are tons of films at this point. At the core of all of it, what is your mission?
It's the mission continues to kind of be refined. When we started Kingdom Story Company, it was right after the first I Can Only Imagine. We had done, several movies, Woodlawn, and then eventually I Can Only Imagine. And on the back of that, there was this moment in time, and the chairman of our board, this our founding partner, this guy named Tony Young, and Tony had gotten a bunch of us filmmakers together in a room, and it was a who's who in the room. Everybody from the Kendricks that have done Fireproof and War Room, and us and several other people were in that room. And he just had a challenge. He's like, guys, we've always been kind of our individual kind of tribes, but what can we do together that none of us can do separately? And so in the middle of that, we were like, we are crazy. There's no way we could all work together. But then when Imagine came out, and right after that, did what it did, we are like, could that be a possibility? So we kind of built Kingdom Story Company on the idea of being a place to curate voices, to where we kind of speak into each other's stuff. It's kind of with filmmakers by filmmakers, uh, and to tell stories of redemption. And I think the thing that's refined, especially even lately, is there's just been a craving, I think, right now in America in particular, for bold faith.
Yeah.
Like they want, like, especially the younger generation, the under 25 crowd, they're like, give me something concrete
Real.
to real to believe in. And that can be hijacked one of two ways. I mean, like the other side of the aisle can pull it that way as well. But for Christianity and the idea of redemption, I think they're looking for something really firm to believe in. And so I think the differentiators in our brand is the idea of bold faith meets authentic humanity, authentic human emotions, and being able to, find those things that are relatable and are believable. And that's where you get rid of all the Christian film cheese out of it,
Yeah.
is when you fight for both of those things. And the closer you get those two things together, there's this magic friction in the middle and of not compromising either side of that aisle. And that's where you get a Jesus revolution. And ultimately, I Can Imagine too that we just did. It's those are the stories, and that's when people that are Christians watch it and be like, finally, my faith is portrayed in a way that's what I believe. And then for the outside world, they say things like, "Oh my gosh, like if that's Christianity, that's really interesting.
Like maybe I want to be a
Yeah,
part of
maybe I want
that,
to be a
right?
part of that." And so you know, it's pretty amazing. It's like, when we did Jesus Revolution, my brother and Britt McCorkle made that movie. Uh, when we showed it to our boss at Lionsgate at the time, and he wasn't a person of faith, watched it. He was like, "Guys, this is the most accepting thing I've ever been able to see." And he's like, "This is really amazing." And we said, "Well, what you call acceptance, we call evangelism. It's an invitation to broken people to come find truth." And he's like, huh. He's like, I think we're okay with that. He's like, we need more of that.
We
So
need more of that.
so
That,
that's been the
wow.
shift right now.
Wow. I mean, you guys have been on the front lines of this for a long time
Right.
now, right? And we'll get into sort of your early story, but I think it's interesting because you use the word evangelism, right? And Hollywood has evangelized in a different direction in a
Right.
lot of ways, and a lot of Christians haven't been present in Hollywood. There are a lot of Christians in
Right.
Hollywood, but the point is, until the last 10 years, you have to go back decades to find the kinds of content in Hollywood that we're seeing now
Yep.
that you guys are creating. How do you keep up safeguards to keep yourself, just even individually and as a company, on track? Because there's so many things that could lure you into,
Sure.
there's money, there's attention, there's certain levels of success. You guys have done a really good job, though, of avoiding all of that and sticking on the evangelistic mission. What keeps you there?
I think it's really about the people that you surround yourself with. There's a reason why we have our headquarters in Franklin, Tennessee. We want to live amongst the people that we make product for. It's kind of like politicians that they say, "Hey, I want to go to Washington D.C. to make a difference," and then they go in and they kind of get,
Sucked in.
sucked into the swamp, and then all of a sudden they're like thinking like everybody else, and they just kind of drone out. You're like, "Well, what happened to the mission you're on?" And it becomes about holding on to power rather than serving the people, and not everybody, but it's kind of the trend. And so for us, we're like, how do we stay connected? So we want to stay connected to our audience, that we're here for a purpose, and then really staying with the missional mindset that, like, like all this goes away really quickly. It doesn't matter how successful a film is. People have a short memory and they forget really quickly. Uh, so if you're chasing it for notoriety or fame, you know, that's that's not going to last. The things that last are telling stories that are eternal and impacting people's lives. It's like, do you tell stories you believe in? Are you there on mission? Are you working with people that you care about? And are you doing something you love? And if you do those things, then it becomes very clear. And I think, a lot of things that kind of get you are obstacles initially to get you into Hollywood, which are like the things that make you different. They're like, well, people don't want this, they don't want that because, they don't want Christian films and that type of stuff. That obstacle, if you push through it, ultimately becomes your audience. And that becomes instead of saying we got to make movies for, everyone, which means you're making a movie for no one, we make movies for an audience that we serve that's underserved. And then we try to make it broadly appealing that people from the outside, when they watch it, they're like, huh, I really love that. And so one of my favorite things to do is to walk down a plane flight, like when we're flying to LA, walk down the aisle and seeing people watching like Jesus Revolution or American Underdog on the screens and watching like grown men cry on a plane. It's great. So it's awesome.
It's interesting too because you brought up. I mean, one of the challenges with the Christian film industry has been, quality over time and some of
Sure.
the cheesiness at
Yeah,
moments,
for
right?
sure.
And I have a lot of grace for that because I think it takes time to
Yeah.
hone a craft, right? It takes time when you haven't been present in Hollywood for people to kind of come in and do it. One of the things you guys have done really well is you tell real stories. In Jesus Revolution, you have a scene where there's drug use, right?
Right, right,
And that's real life. This is
right,
what happened in the story. A lot of times in the past, people would have said, well, we can't include that. It's going to offend people. It's like, but
right.
that's the story. And so I don't know if you want to reflect on that at all, but I think it's actually really powerful that you guys have told the real stories. You haven't shied
Yeah.
away from that, and you've done it in a way that's appropriate.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I think that's what, there was a bunch of us that came in at the same time that, Mel Gibson does The Passion of the Christ in 2004. Christianity had led the arts for 2,000 years. And in the 1960s, we gave up our seat at the table. We're like, Christians don't go to movie theaters. And as a result, that seat was taken from us. It wasn't taken away. We gave it up. But when Mel did The Passion, all of a sudden there was a bunch of us being like, well, why can't we do that? But none of us knew how. We were a bunch of novices that were like, it was a hobby. I was working for ESPN and we were doing some music videos, but but there was a group of people that came in. The Kendricks came in and they did Fireproof. You had Dallas Jenkins that came into the game around that time. You had Alejandro Monteverde that ended up doing Sound of Freedom. Alejandro did an amazing film called Bella. And then we came in the game, Devon Franklin. There was a bunch of us that all kind of came in at the same time, and we were trying to figure out like, how do we do this job? Uh, but initially, it was absolutely we were all part of the cheese. I
Which is
think,
okay when you're
yeah.
starting. It's
I mean, and
okay.
I think that for some of those people, I see brave trailblazers like what the Kendricks did with a church that had no budget and they're like, we're gonna go do movies. Like what?
It's wild.
Like
Yeah.
so when somebody says, "Oh, that must have been cheesy," no, I see trailblazers. That's a lot of courage to be the first. You got to take a lot of arrows in the back. Um, but in the midst of that, I think where we found our voice was when we did Woodlawn, and Woodlawn was our first true story. And it was a story that we had heard growing up as a bedtime story from my father that he lived it. I mean, Sean Astin in that film is playing a conglomerate character that includes my father, and so that film when it came out was our first A+ cinema score, so the audience liked it. It was our first thing to be rated favorably by the critics, and it had a massive evangelistic impact. Even though financially that wasn't our breakout hit, it was just that was where we found our voice. And we're like, there's something powerful, but the Bible says that because the Bible says they overcame the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the power of their testimony. So when you have a testimony, there's just something really special about it's your experience of how you came to faith. And so we're like, why can't we do more of that? And, I think what made the cheese is a lot of Christian products in the early days, we were afraid of tension. We were afraid of struggle. And people went either one of two ways. They either went gritty and like, we're going to try to be accepted by the world and make things edgy. That was the word edgy. Or they did cheesy. It was just squeaky clean. The cheesiness came from the fact that it was like, we didn't like the tension. And it was like a Pfizer ad. It's like, let me show you this medication and let me tell you all the side effects that are going to kill you, that could kill you And, while the shiny, happy people say we have no problems, like people didn't want that. And so we're like, well, what if we embrace the tension, the real struggle of what people came through, and then find a way to weave in the gospel? And so that's kind of where we found our voice. And there's been a real power to that. True stories. We don't do just true stories,
But that's been
but
a big area of
yeah,
focus.
that's been our focus.
Yeah, I mean that to your point, I mean, those are the stories that matter. People
Yeah,
care, right?
they
Like
do.
and you have a built-in audience with a lot of the people that
Correct.
you're doing those stories on. So it
Correct.
does help get it out there. Going back to your story, obviously ESPN, then you guys kind of start working on music videos, right?
Right.
And I think about October Baby, which I don't
Yeah.
remember what year that was, 2011,
2010.
2010. That
Yeah.
was when you and I first met,
Yeah. Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
October Baby,
It's about 16 years ago.
which is wild, which is crazy. That when you think about that film and that process and where you are today and the
Right.
growth there, reflect on that a little bit because I love that film, but I know you probably look back and you see
Yeah.
like, wow, we have transitioned and changed so much since that time.
You learn a lot. I'm really proud of that film.
Great film.
It's funny from that movie, just seeing just how people have grown from that. But when we were doing, I was working for ESPN. It was, the film thing was a hobby. We were doing music videos at the time. We gotten really good at blowing things up with music videos. I think in fact, the last music video we did for a band called Skillet, we did a music video for a song called Hero, and I think this treatment that we wrote there read, the band comes out, things blow up, it starts to rain, more things blow up, it stops raining, everything blows up, and they had like a 500 million views on YouTube. But uh, yeah, I think in the middle of that we kind of become hired guns. We were just like, we're here to do a job. And then there came that moment. It was actually from the Kendricks that my brother had decided to go work second unit on the movie Courageous, and I had stayed home to do a music video for Casting Crowns and a country music video for Montgomery Gentry. And John gave me a call and he said, I just had a crazy interaction with Alex Kendrick. He pulled me aside and he's like, John, what's the purpose of you being here? Why are you here? And I told him, I'm here for a paycheck, Alex, and he's like, it's time for you and your brother to get off the sidelines and find your stories to tell.
Oh, wow.
And so when we talked to Alex and Steven, we just said, we don't do what you do. You guys do, you do lessons, teaching lessons as a pastor to a church. It's to the preaching to the choir. It's edification. It's not what we do. And we're filmmakers. We just want to tell stories. And they're like, guys, don't try to be us. They're like, God called, Peter to the Jews, Paul to the Gentiles. There were different audiences, but for the same purpose, for the gospel. It's like, find your audience and go tell your stories. And that was the wisest thing they could have said. And so then we set out and struggled through it, trying to find our stories. But the first one was October Baby, a little tiny micro budget film under $1 million, about the power of adoption, and a girl trying to find her birth mother. I was inspired by somebody's story that we knew. And we just like, we're going to go into this and without all the bells and whistles, we're just going to tell something really simple. And it's flawed. And, there's a lot of things that I would definitely do different now. But it was where we kind of were like, okay, we're going to give this a shot. And if we fail, we fail. And that was the first one. And there was just this ragtag group of like, kids with a dream that, like the Muppet Bus, be like, we're going to Hollywood. And it was funny because it was like, nobody would touch the film when we went to go put it out. And then when we finally kind of got a chance, we just like, we're going to put it out independently, and we put it out, and then it did well enough for us to make another movie. And so that's where like, okay, I think this has gone from a hobby to a career, but we still hadn't found our voice. It was still us just trying to imitate things. But we did that's where we kind of got a taste of movies. And I absolutely, absolutely loved that first experience. There's something really romantic about the first film, and that one was.
What is the biggest thing that God has shown you about yourself as you've gone on this journey? Because there's a lot that happens. There's a lot of success, there's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure, there's a lot of
Yeah.
even feeling, and I can't speak for you, but I know because it's just the reality of the weight of numbers and how things
Oh yeah.
perform and struggling not to put value in that. What have you learned about yourself in this process?
I think the longer I'm in this job, the more I become interested in the stories, and the less I become interested in myself. You know, I love what we do, but what I do is not who I am. And I think the more I found that freedom in that ability to divorce myself from what I do, it allowed me to kind of do it with the right reasons. There's the quote behind me on the wall, the Ronald Reagan quote of, "It's amazing the things a man can accomplish when he doesn't care who gets the credit." And I think we tell stories that we love. I work with people that I love, and at the end of the day, we should all have our fingerprints on it and have something we're really proud of. And that's the secret to our quality is the team. There's a great team here. And so from, the producers I get to work with Josh Walsh next door to Brandon Gregory, who runs for Kingdom with me, to Daryl Lefevre, there's just a core team of individuals here that are here on mission. And it really starts with that that quote that Tony Young said of what can we do together, none of us can do separately. I think where I learned that lesson was on the first I Can Only Imagine. I that film, when we went to go make it, we did a page one rewrite of the script that had been done at another studio. They didn't like where we were going with it, and so we kind of came to a parting of the ways there. We went and bought the rights to go do it ourselves, but we raised the money to go make it and went to go shoot it in Oklahoma. The budget was a fraction of what it should have been, and I showed up in Oklahoma, and we had written the role of the father in that film for Mel Gibson. We really wanted Mel, and at the last minute, Mel took another film, and he couldn't do it. The idea fell through, and so we didn't have anybody to play the father. We had a no-name cast other than people like Trace Atkins, people like that, but we didn't have like an anchor to make a big splash. And we're in Oklahoma. The first day on a film set is always terrifying, and you're always like, do I even know what I'm doing? Do I know how to do this job? And it gets to the end of the first day. I went back to my apartment and I had a panic attack, and I couldn't breathe. I was like, God, I'm either making the best film ever or the worst, and I don't know which one it is. And then God, in his still small voice, was like, Andy, is that okay? I was like, no, I don't want to fail. He's like, Andy, is that okay? And I was like, all right, if it's a failure, it's your problem. And I said, so what do you want to do with this film? And I just kind of, there's this place that happens a lot of times for those of us. There's so much ego that gets wrapped up in the creative process because
Yeah.
it's subjective, and you're afraid of don't judge what I'm trying to make. But there's this place that happens when you let go of the boat and you're like, I'm going to swim. I'm going to swim for shore. And if I drowned, I drowned. And you kind of accept your fate, that you kind of come at it from this place of wild abandon where I'm playing with house money. I can't lose, you know?
How much is prayer involved in this? Because it's interesting. I know in my life I will often forget to, and lately I haven't been. I've been really good about prayer. It's like everything I'm doing, like, God, what do you want me to do with this? How do you want me to do it? Who
Yep.
do you want me to talk to today? What do you want? When it comes to a film like this, from the inception of the idea down to the first day on set, how integral is prayer for you in that?
Huge. Huge. I mean, I think it's the first thing that a lot of times gets thrown out until I start hitting a brick wall and be like, maybe I should stop and pray about this and ask God what he wants to do. I think, the Bible says that, without faith, it's impossible to please God. And I think faith gets misconstrued a lot of times. I think faith a lot of times is construed as something I want. Uh, but I think faith is really about surrender. It's about trust. And it's about, okay, God, you're the boss. You're in charge.
Listening.
I'm here. What do you want to do? I'm available. What do you want to do today? What do you want this film to be? Who do you want to be in it? Who do you want to impact? And there's this freedom that comes from that, where then you feel an empowering from God of making it really, really clear of how you're supposed to do the job. And, um, I think that what I found on this last film, we just wrapped, I Can Only Imagine too. It's amazing. But what I found is God's a lot more, when we slow down, God's a lot more concerned with the how and the why than the what. I think we get obsessed with the what. This is what I'm doing. But I think God's really a lot more concerned with the how and the why. Why am I doing it? And then how do I do the job? And I think when we do that, I think all of a sudden there's this beautiful ministry that happens in how we do it. And then the byproduct is, I think we make a pretty good what. I think the what follows it, but it's in the right order.
Well, and if you know you were called to do it,
Right.
worrying about the numbers in the box office. Obviously, it's a factor in life and
God
business,
works all
but
that out.
it doesn't matter because
Yeah,
God will work it out. It may be that there were certain people who were supposed to see that project. It was supposed to
right.
be what it was. It may be a stepping stone into something else. I'm sure you've seen this a
Well, there's
million
so
times.
much that you can't control. I mean, it's like when we did I Still Believe, that movie was on the trajectory because KJ Apa gave an amazing performance and was hotter than hot at that time. And and when that movie came out, the numbers were coming in that we were on pace to potentially have our first number one weekend. Like we were outpacing the Pixar movie that was out at that time. And Lionsgate texted us and was like, "Hey guys, be prepared for your first number one." Then COVID hits, like that weekend. That's when like everything started shutting down. By Tuesday, every movie theater was closed down. So it's like our lowest box office total outside of our first film, October Baby. Now it was on trajectory to do massive numbers, but I can't control what happens in the world. Like you never know what tomorrow holds. So you can control like the how and the why. Like, why am I here and how am I supposed to do my job? And I'm going to tell a story that I absolutely believe in the why. And I'm going to do it with integrity as best as I know how, being a flawed human being that needs grace. And then God will sort out the what. And sometimes that's a massive win. And sometimes God's got other plans and he has a bigger narrative that is way bigger than my little thing. And I just have to trust that, he'll take care of it. And as a result, like I stand behind like the stories that we tell and how God's used them. And sometimes that's a massive box office total, and sometimes it finds its audience later. But I mean, things come full circle. And last year, I Still Believe came out on Netflix. I didn't even know it was on Netflix, and then everybody's texting me that it had broken into the top like five, I think, at the time when it came back to Netflix. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So you never know.
You just never know. Okay, so that brings us to I Can Only Imagine 2.
Right.
Now, the sequel to this film, I think a lot of people are like, wait a minute, there's a sequel?
Yeah.
Like, what was it that
I was the
led
first
you?
person to ask you that question. I was like, really?
We're doing a sequel? What was it that convinced you that this was the next film?
I was a tough one to convince on this one. Like I said we don't need to do this for years with ideas that were getting thrown out. Like I don't want to make a sequel unless we're going back on purpose. I don't want it to be a cash grab. I don't want it to be a gimmick. I want it to be a great story. Like I want it to be one of those sequels that's as good or better than the original, like Godfather 2 or Paddington 2, whatever side of the spectrum you want to go with. I want to go with something that it builds. And and I just didn't want it to feel like a repeat. And so Bart, and then Cindy Bond, that was the original producer on the first Imagine, had been talking. They came back. They're like, "Hey, we want to talk to you about this movie in the I Can Only Imagine world." I was like, I don't know, I'm not interested." Then they talked to Brent McCorkle, who's one of our key creatives that wrote the original with my brother and then co-directed Jesus Revolution with John. And so Brent had come up with an idea. He said, "Have you heard the story of Even If, the song?" And I was like, "Oh, I know the song. It's a great song." And he's like, "No, just sit still." And he's like, at the end of the first Imagine, we gave Bart his happily ever after. In this movie, we break the happily ever after, and Bart's life falls apart, and he has to ask the question of God, where's the hope that I felt before when everything it doesn't work out? And he goes on this journey, but now as a father himself with his son, who's got health struggles. And he walks me through, and then this character, Tim Timmons, comes into his life as the opening act. Tim Timmons in this film is played by the one and only Milo Ventimiglia from Gilmore Girls and This Is Us. Amazing guy. And so Tim comes in as this kind of just breath of fresh air that has this idea of gratitude. And so, every day he writes this X on his wrist, and that God woke me up for one more day, and I'm grateful for today. And it's this struggle between grief and gratitude. And he has this song that he doesn't know how to finish called Even If. And when Bart finally listens to it, the whole trajectory of where his career goes. And we end the film at Red Rocks with 8,500 extras in the stands, and this epic moment that really completes the whole Imagine journey, with now Bart as a father towards his son, where the first movie was him as a son towards his father. It's a mirror image in a way that it's the second half of the whole. And so when they got done with it, they were pitching me, and they're like, "It's kind of like the spiritual sequel that I Can Only Imagine." I was like, "No, that's the actual sequel." I was like, "I will direct that like tomorrow." And I was like, "Brent, do you want to direct that together?" And he's like, "Absolutely." And so I called Lionsgate. we set up this big elaborate pitch meeting with the Lionsgate, our distributor, and I said, so I'm walking through about 30 seconds of the pitch. They're like, guys, we're obviously doing this movie. I was like, we have a whole presentation, and they're like, no, it's a yes, we're doing it. And
Wow.
then I called everybody back together, and I called John Michael Finley that played Bart in the original. I was like, there's two ways this goes down. You say yes to me on the phone right now, or I drive to New Jersey, I kidnap you, and then you say yes to this movie. So everybody got the whole band back together, including Dennis Quaid, in a way that I can't really explain, but it's amazing. It's amazing. Everybody's like, wait a minute, I thought he died. No, it's awesome.
So Dennis Quaid
So
is back.
Dennis Quaid's back, but I'm not telling you how he's back in this story, but he is a meaningful part of this story. Trace Adkins is back, stealing the show's Brickle. The band's back. And then we've got some new faces like this kid, Sammy Dale, playing Sam, you're going to fall in love with. It's like, Nick Jonas and Zac Efron had a baby. It's like amazing. He's just great. And then we've got Sophie Skelton is coming to play Shannon, and then Milo. Milo's amazing.
When this film comes out, when this film hits in February and audiences see it, what do you want them thinking and feeling?
I think it is this one. It's been amazing to watch. Like, so we did the test screenings, and you always get nervous about the test screenings. Like, is it what I think it is? The audience decides. I don't decide that. The audience decides, and we test the heck out of our films. And so when we did the test screenings with Lionsgate, this film scored higher than anything we've ever had. It scored a point higher than the original Imagine. So it scored a 97 overall with the crowd. Scored a 92% definite recommend. We've never had a film do that. And so this one delivers. And I think the thing that delivers and what the audience loves is, first of all, even if it's a great song and, Red Rocks is a sacred venue and like it's epic, it delivers. But the thing that I think they're registering with is the first movie was about hope. But this movie's about gratitude, and gratitude is hope with teeth to it. It's lived in hope. It's got bumps and bruises, and it's embraced the hardships of life to find meaning and purpose. And it's beyond a desire. It's something that is a core belief, and it goes back to what I was talking about of people wanting something concrete and grounded to attach to. And so I think with, just the state of the world and what everything is, people want to feel uplifted, but they also don't want to gloss over the hardships in life. And so this movie does a good job of, I think, offering legitimately something to hold on to tangibly. And it just leaves you feeling good. You want to go out of the theater wanting to change the world. And I think people are in for experience. And I think the thing to overcome is people are like, why did you need a sequel? But once they see the movie, they're like, oh my gosh, I get it. And so I can't wait for audiences to start embracing this film.
That's amazing. Well, we're in such a heavy time. I mean, it's
Yeah.
always it's a heavy time. At the same time, it's a hopeful time, right?
Right.
You've got revival breaking out. You've
Right.
also got Charlie Kirk's murder, confusion,
For sure.
hatred, anger, and you have these things happening, this evil and this good at the same time. And with all the questions you just mentioned,
Yep.
I always like to ask, and you kind of answered it, but we'll sort of end here. Considering where we are right now, why is this the perfect film to hit us at this moment?
I mean, perfect film is one I'm going to squirm with because there's no such thing as a perfect
A
film.
good film.
It's
An appropriate
you
film.
always chase as close to great as you can get. You just keep chasing it. It's something quality, something we always chase, not something we ever catch. We just get better. But I think it's the right film for the moment. I think the reason is for all those things that you mentioned is is the tension between grief and gratitude. It's like, man, we've gone through some hard stuff. Absolutely. But you see the character in this generation that are coming up saying, like, give me something real. I want to believe in something. I want hope. I want real faith. I don't want stuff. And that's why they gravitated towards Charlie and others, is they really wanted something that's like, oh, that guy really believes that. And it makes sense. And it seems like it's something that's worth dying for. Like, I want a belief like that. And so I think this story offers that kind of bold faith, but in a way that is very authentically human. And I think it'll leave people, you know, because I think that what's going to change the world isn't going to be winning an argument. What's going to change the world is people having changed hearts. I think people desperately need the gospel, and the gospel is good news. I mean, it's literally the definition of the word gospel. And so I think that people are desperately craving hope right now, and in quantities that larger than anything. So what used to be cheese, I think now is counterculture, and people really want to be like, I want that. And so I think there's an opportunity for us as Christians. I think there's an opportunity in the faith film industry like I've never seen before. I mean, not just with us. I mean, I look at what God's doing with Dallas Jenkins over there with The Chosen, what God's using my brother, over with his House of David show. What God's doing with Alejandro, and what he did with Sound of Freedom. Like, there's a moment right now with Faith Product that I've never seen before, where the studios are literally coming to us and being like, "Do you have enough Jesus in your film?" I'm like, am I getting punked?
Yeah,
Like, what
10
is
years
this?
ago it would
Is
have
this
been
real?
like, you'd be begging maybe a little bit more,
But I think what they sense is there is an audience that is craving what these kind of films deliver, and I think there's a moment for the gospel that I don't know how long it lasts, but right now people are listening to how Christians are voting with their movie tickets and what they watch, and they're like, oh, okay, let's do more of that. So vote with your ticket.
That's why showing up is so important.
That
People
is.
should go see I Can Only
Go see. I
Imagine
can only
too.
imagine too.
That's right. It brings it all together. Well,
Yeah.
well, Andy, appreciate you taking the time and joining us today.
Always a pleasure, Billy. It's good to have you in my office.